Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is Real Talk with Coach Sherri. And today I want to talk a little bit about a serious subject regarding life and death. I recently found out just yesterday that my great aunt had died. She was in her 90s, her early 90s, and she was one of my grandmother's sisters. She's the last living sibling of my maternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother was one of 15, and she was the very first out of 15 to pass away. And unfortunately, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing my grandmother. She died exactly 1 year before I was born. But before she died, she had told my mother that she had a dream that she was going to have a little girl. And at that time, I had two brothers who were about 7 and 8 years old. And my parents thought they were done, like, no, I'm not, we're not going to have any more kids or whatever. Not that they didn't want any more, but my mother just thought, that she probably couldn't have any more. She did have very challenging pregnancy. So they just said, well, we're probably not going to have any more. But her mother told her she would. And exactly a year later, the same month, I was born. And that's a whole nother story that I'll have to tell you guys one day. But I didn't get a chance to meet my grandmother. And so as I got older and started going around her siblings more, my grandmother grew up in South Carolina, but she raised my mother in New Jersey. Because my grandfather, my mother's dad, he was from Virginia, and they met in New Jersey, and that's where they raised their family. My grandmother was relatively young when she died. She was about 56, and my mother was 28, and my mother is one of four. And, they all took their mother's death really hard. My grandmother came from a very close family. She had, like I said, 15 siblings, 13 of which were girls and 2 were boys. And so all the sisters were very close. They really were. And they were beautiful women. The brothers were very handsome, a very beautiful family. And as I got older and I started going around my grandmother's people more, to family reunions and things like that, I remember I used to just want to know everything that anyone could tell me about my grandmother. And it always made me feel some kind of way, especially at family reunions, because really, since my grandmother was the first one to pass, and they live a long time, like this aunt that just died, this great aunt that just died was in her early 90s. They lived to late 90s, 100. They really live. And so for me to know that my grandmother had died so young at 56, it used to make me sad because I would see everyone else there with their grandmothers, their great grandmothers and stuff. And I would just be like, wow, I never got to experience that. And they all were so nice. And people would tell me, that this one or that one really was a lot like my grandmother. But I would always want to know stories about my grandmother. Like, could you please tell me, how was she? What did she like? And at first, when I would ask those types of questions, my great aunts would always think, are you trying to write a book? Like, why you ask so many questions? I guess they weren't used to people being as curious as I was. But I really wanted to know about my grandmother. So this sibling that died, she was actually the youngest child. I want to say she was the youngest or the youngest girl. It might have been a brother that was a year younger than her or something. Either she was the youngest or he was, but she was one of the youngest, definitely the youngest girl. And her name was Alberta. And Aunt Alberta, she had gotten married many years ago. But she also had gotten divorced. She never had any children. So she really gravitated to the young people. She was so young at heart. I mean, when I would see them all, none of them seemed their age at all. They knew what was going on. They were into sports. They were funny. But Aunt Alberta was a hairdresser, and her house, she had a ranch house in South Carolina, and attached to the house, and it was part of the house really, but it was a separate entrance, was her beauty parlor. And I remember, and this is going into that movie that I did a review on, about Self-Made with Madam C.J. Walker, about Madam C.J. Walker. So when I really got into Madam C.J. Walker and I knew she was a hair, did things with hair, I remember asking my aunt, like, oh my goodness, did you know anything about Madam C.J. Walker? And she was like, yeah, back in the day, I actually went to one of her conventions, and she gave me a pin from Madam C.J. Walker's convention that she had. I was like, oh my goodness. My aunt wasn't old enough to have met Madam C.J. Walker, because Madam C.J. Walker died, I think like 1918 or something like that. So that was before this aunt started doing hair, and probably shortly before she was even born. However, she was very familiar with Madam CJ Walker, and like I said, she went to her convention, which was amazing to me. But I really enjoyed Aunt Alberta. She was funny, like I said, and just so full of life. I remember when she turned 80, and it almost like she was in her 70s forever. She couldn't wait to be 80 because she was the baby, the only one that was still alive, the youngest, and all her other siblings were older than her, and she just was like, I'm so young, and they're older or whatever. Then when she turned 80, she started kind of recognizing that I'm getting a little old now. I think that's so wonderful to just think you're starting to get old at 80. Oh, dare to dream. So yeah, she was in a nursing home and had not been doing well. So she didn't die from the virus or anything, but she died, and I want to believe that she died peacefully. Unfortunately, because of the virus, she won't be able to have a, huge funeral. I mean, I had another one of my most dearest cousins' mom passed away last week, and, funeral arrangements just can't happen. We're all hopeful that in the future we can have something special at the grave sites of the loved ones that have passed on, because it's just not going to be safe at this time for all of us to get together. And especially at a funeral, you want to embrace everyone, and it's just too much to risk right now. But yeah, my grandmother's youngest sister died, and she was the last living sibling of my grandmother's, and it's just strange to me. It's definitely a book that has been closed. Their legacies are definitely going to live on, even though that aunt didn't have any children. She had a host of nieces and nephews and great nieces and great nieces and great nephews and everything, to definitely continue with the legacy, because out of the 15, only 3 of them didn't have any children. No, 4 didn't have any children, and the rest did. And I think the least amount of children that the ones who did have children had was 4. My grandmother actually had 5, but 1 passed away as a little girl. But she had 4, and so the rest of her siblings had 5 or more children, and some had double digits. So my mother had a lot of first cousins, and just a huge family, loving family, very nice. They're very kind and nice people. Their demeanor is really, really sweet and calm. They're not hyper and loud and crazy acting. They don't get drunk, and they don't cuss each other out. They don't slam doors, hate each other. It's amazing, actually, when I think about it, because I'm not like that either, but I am a little more excitable than they are. But I always found when I would go to visit that I would kind of find myself relaxing more, because I knew that it wasn't going to be any stress or drama. And that's actually a good thing. I have, on my father's side of the family, it's like that too. I would say the men on my father's side, and my father included, are loud typically, and just boisterous, just men being men. But the women are very calm, and my father's 2 sisters that are still alive, they're real calm and cool. I always used to say I wanted to grow up to be like them, because they just have this really nice demeanor. So I've been actually very fortunate and blessed on both sides of my family to have family members that just don't get into a lot of mess. And if there is mess, they kind of handle it in-house. It's really good. It's good. I'm not going to say it's we don't have our challenges, because we do, just like anyone else, but we don't bring those challenges onto ourselves knowingly, which, I think is a blessing. Yeah, my father told me about my aunt passing, and I don't know. I just felt some kind of way. Not really sad, because I know that she has lived a full life and has lived a very blessed life, very fortunate life, had a successful business, you know. But just, it's almost like the changing of the guards. And I'm sorry, my video got interrupted by a phone call. I didn't put my phone on airplane mode, but I'm just gonna wrap this video up and just let you know that yeah, for years, my great aunts used to always say, like, you guys, what are you going to do? You guys have to take it to the next level, like family reunions and things like that. And I think we all felt and took it for granted that they would be here for us and with us forever. But, you know, reality is no one's here forever, and you always have to plan for what's next. Be in line to be next. And so I'm charging everyone that's listening to this video to, when it comes to family, think about what the legacy is going to be and how are you going to take the torch when it's handed to you to take it to the next level. What are you teaching the ones that are coming up behind you? How do you want them to take it to the next level? Okay. So you guys, I want to thank you for tuning in, and please be sure, if you enjoyed this video and the content, to like it, share it if you think someone else will need to hear this message as well. And if you're not already part of the team, I would love to have you part of my team. Please be sure to subscribe, ring the bell for notification for when I do post new videos. Everyone, especially in the state of the world, please stay safe. Stay safe out there in those streets. Watch your back. Help one another. Be kind to one another. Love your family. Tell them you love them. All right. Thank you for tuning in again. This has been Real Talk with Coach Sherri.